If there's one common complaint I hear from a lot of the people I work with, it's that they all feel incredibly exhausted and burned out with life in general. So I'm not just talking about work burnout or exhaustion from not sleeping enough, but just this general sense of I'm so tired to the bone with life in general. And when we start digging into why that is, I'm starting to notice a common pattern coming up, and I think it might resonate, and I would love to know how it lands for you. I think a lot of us are actually suffering from an overload of obligation fatigue. And if that is a new term for you, it's probably because I just made it up, but stick with me because we're unpacking it in today's video. First, if you're new here, my name is Karen McGill. I'm an ADHD coach and creator, and I'm here for the busy, ambitious brains who want to do all the things, but they are absolutely exhausted by all of the obligations in their life that are holding them hostage. But hopefully we can start to address that right now. Let's get into it. So what is this obligation fatigue that I'm talking about? In my mind, obligation is the opposite of authenticity. Authenticity is everything we say and do and believe as an expression of love. It's our truth. Obligation, on the other hand, is everything that we do to manage outcomes. It's a form of manipulation where we're not actually operating from a place of truth or love. And when I say that, I'm not suggesting that all obligations are necessarily bad, but we do them not because they're coming from a place of truth and love. It comes from a place of wanting a specific outcome and doing what we need to do to get there. So hear me out, because I'm not vilifying obligation. In some cases, it's what we have to do. But when it starts to drive our entire life, we become the vehicle and not the driver, which is why we burn out and get exhausted and start to hate the life that we're building for ourselves. Now, I see this a lot in my ADHD clients because we're always trying to fit into a world that wasn't built for us, right? Like we are neurodivergent people trying to fit into a neurotypical world. But that urge to fit in tends to come from a place of obligation rather than just being our true, authentic selves, which is why we have a tendency to mask so often. And like I said, obligation, even though sometimes it is real and necessary, it is a form of manipulation. And we're probably saying things and doing things and committing to things that we don't actually want to do. So not only is it a form of manipulation in order to either manage a relationship or manipulate an outcome, but it's also a form of self-abandonment, because every time you choose something out of obligation, you are saying no to what you truly believe or want to do. And no wonder then we get so exhausted when we do this time after time after time. And the ironic thing is that this form of manipulation is actually driven from a place of people pleasing. We want people to like us and we want to make people happy, which is why we feel obliged to say yes when what we truly want to do is say no. You are lying to manipulate an outcome, which might just be to make them happy, but then you're also taking ownership of somebody else's feelings, which is, first of all, not your job, but is also very exhausting because you really cannot control how other people feel about anything. So when you think about obligation from that perspective, that is not only self-abandonment, but is manipulation and lying and trying to control the feelings of others to get an optimal outcome for what you want, it really adds a new layer of complexity to something we would have otherwise considered honorable, because we commend people for holding true to their obligations. We commend parents for their commitment to give their children the best opportunities at life that they can. We commend pet owners for taking care of their pets. But when you think about it, even though we're calling it an obligation on the surface, a lot of it is done from a place of true love. We truly love our kids, so we want to give them the best. So they're not truly acting from a place of manipulation, even though some days it can definitely feel like more of an obligation than it is a true expression of love. It is generally rooted in that sense of this is what I truly want to do. However, then there's all of the obligations over here that we agree to because we want to be perceived as a nice person, or we don't want to piss anybody off, or because we need the money or we need the help. So we do the thing and we say we're happy to do it, even though in reality, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And when we do those things from a place of obligation, even if the outcome that we're trying to manipulate is for the greater good, like we want somebody to like us or to fortify a relationship, it actually ends up undermining it, because when we follow through with these things that we don't want to do, we feel resentful and tired and we don't want to be there. So we don't show up as our true self. When you think about it from that perspective, living your life from this place of obligation to manipulate outcomes day after day, you could just imagine how exhausting that would be and just toxic, because you are never living a life true to yourself. You're constantly abandoning yourself in order to fit into a mold that accommodates all the people around you, but never the true you. So let's workshop this. I invite you to get a piece and pen and paper if you want, or just do this in your head and start making a note of all of the obligations that you currently have in your life, whether it's at home or at work or in your relationships with other people, hobbies, whatever you are saying yes to or doing, committing to, or even talking about that is not 100% in true alignment with what you really feel or your personal truth. I want you to write it down in one column. And another tip to really clarify things is that whatever you do that generally has a should in front of it is something that is not 100% aligned to what you authentically want to do. Like, I should call her, or I should see my mom this weekend. And to be clear, there can absolutely be people and situations in your life that you truly do want to be connected to, but you're not showing up authentically in that situation. This comes back to a video I did a couple of years ago about feeling exhausted. And in that video, I read an excerpt from a poem from David White where he talks about the root of exhaustion being the sense of not showing up wholeheartedly. And of course, that fits beautifully with what we're talking about here, because when you're not showing up wholeheartedly, you probably are showing up out of obligation. So again, it's worth it to take the time to write a list of the areas where you know you are not showing up wholeheartedly, where you're showing up out of a sense of obligation to either manipulate an outcome or a relationship, and perhaps abandoning yourself. So beside that list of obligations that you just wrote, create a new list of what you would do if you were living in 100% alignment with your true self. And then once you've got those two lists, I want you to take a minute to just digest where the differences are. Like, how would you show up differently if you were being 100% authentically true to yourself? I think a lot of us looking at that list of who we would truly be would have a lot of fear. Like, if we truly showed up as who we really are, people wouldn't like it, because that's the first feeling that came out for me. I thought, oh my God, if I operated from a place of who I really was, people wouldn't like me. And it's like, what's up with that? Even if I were only to do the things I truly want to do, if I were to live from 100% alignment, it's not like I would become an evil person or I would immediately start being rude to people. I can say no to things in a loving and caring way, and it doesn't make me a bad person. And while that may sound Captain Obvious, it really wasn't until I thought about it, because we are raised to say yes to things, especially girls. You're not supposed to say no, because when you say no, you're bad. So that little exercise was truly enlightening for me, and I hope it was for you too. And to just underscore the importance of this, I want to read to you a message I got from a reader. This is what she said. I am the ever-ready bunny. I keep going and going, persistent to a fault, but I never know where I'm going, and I'm not going to be in very good shape when I arrive wherever I end up. Oof, I could totally feel that one. So she goes on to explain her situation, which I won't give all of the details, but she's a part-time caregiver. She has some grown children, and the person she's in a relationship with wants to get married, but one of her adult children is against the idea, and she feels obligated towards that child. She goes on to talk about a job that she doesn't like and pays very little. She says she doesn't enjoy doing anything anymore. She just goes through the motions of doing things she's responsible for. And she feels exhausted with unimportant and unproductive activities that keep her from even thinking about things that she should take action on. Now, interestingly enough, she took a needs assessment that I offer on my website. And some of her top needs that she mentioned were to be alone, to be safe, and to be free. Her lowest needs were to be needed, to be in control, and to be working. Now, if that doesn't sound like obligation fatigue, I don't know what does. And while I didn't read you all of the details of her message, I can assure you that this woman clearly stated that she is living her life entirely for the people around her, so much so that she doesn't even know what she wants for herself anymore. So to this woman and to anyone else who feels that way, I highly recommend doing that quick exercise of making a list of the things that feel like they're coming from a place of obligation versus what you would do if you were operating from a place of authenticity. And then taking a moment to just reflect on what you see. Sit with that dissonance of who you are currently showing up as versus who you really are. There's no wrong feelings to feel about this. It's okay if there is a big gap between how you're showing up and who you authentically are, because to some degree, that's true of all of us. None of us show up authentically as we truly are 100% of the time, because we still have to live in this world that calls upon us to be obligated to do certain things. So rather than feeling like the only way past this is to burn your life down and start all over, I want to assure you that the best way forward is just taking a slow unraveling approach and start with the low-hanging fruit. Obviously, there's going to be areas of your life where you just cannot release obligation or start saying what's ever on your mind. But there are other areas in your life where you can start taking more agency to be who you truly are and say what's truly on your heart from a kind place, of course. And that can be in your relationships or the way you spend your time or your money. It can be the things that you wear or the things you have in your home. If they are yours and they don't feel 100% truly aligned to who you are, it is a liberating experience to start taking actions to remove things that are no longer aligned with who you are or who you want to be in this world. And over time, if you continue that trajectory, not only will you start to feel more wholehearted and truly start to enjoy your life, but you're going to feel less exhausted, less burned out, and less fatigued by all of the obligations that you have been living for. And if you want a great example of this practice, I would highly recommend reading this book from Martha Beck. I will put a link to it below. And on that note, guys, I hope I've touched a chord for you, especially if you're someone who feels exhausted and burned out and not feeling like you're living a wholehearted life. And my hope for you is that you take even just one small action to bridge that gap between your authentic self and the person you feel obligated to be. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.